Let's prepare ourselves. If you put your hand over your eyes, I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
And now over your ears, I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
Now you put your hand over your heart and just extend out your arms. I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
The spiritual truth that I'm working with today is that our life, all of our life, all the experiences of our life are an outpicturing of our consciousness. Our life is an outpicturing of our consciousness. Now we have some visitors today, so I want to make sure that we're all on the same page as to what consciousness means in this church. Because it means a lot of different things in a lot of different circles. But when we say it here, what we're talking about are our thoughts and our beliefs, both conscious, the ones we're awake and aware to, because thoughts, they don't get to become beliefs until they're unshakable. They're thoughts that are unshakable. That's when they get to be called beliefs. They grow up. They get to be called beliefs. But our consciousness is not only our beliefs, but it's our thoughts and our beliefs that we're awake and aware to, and the thoughts and our beliefs that we're unaware of. And generally speaking, it's the thoughts and beliefs that we're unaware of that will trip us up most in our life. So we look at our life and something's not working in our finances or in our marriage or somewhere, and we begin to look at what there might be in the subconscious area of our life. So if you want to improve your love life, you want to improve your business life, you want to improve your family life, you want to improve your community life, stay awake. Stay awake. See, too often, we go on automatic pilot. And we're just moving along, things are happening, we don't understand why, because we're on automatic pilot. We're not actually in our thoughts and our beliefs. I want to tell you a story that I learned about. It's from the library in Alexandria in Egypt. In the ancient times, it was one of the greatest libraries there was. And there was a terrific fire, and it all burned down. And they thought they had lost all the books. There was just ashes everywhere. And one day, a pauper was walking through the rubble, and he found one book that hadn't burned. And he picked the book up, and out of the book fell a parchment paper. And on the parchment paper was written the legend of the Touchstone. The legend of the Touchstone goes like this. There was once a stone on the beaches of the Black Sea. And it was a stone that was warm to the touch. Most stones are cold to the touch. This is a warm stone to the touch. And he who picked it up would have a life of prosperity, a life of health. This stone turned metal into gold. A life of joy. Whoever picked this stone up could do forgiveness immediately. Didn't have to go to a workshop, just God to forgive. Whoever picked this stone up could be with their mother-in-law for more than 10 minutes on Thanksgiving. Easy. This was a powerful, powerful stone. So the pauper decided that he would go to the Black Sea and he would look for the stone. And he went and he began to pick up a stone and feel it. If it was cold, he'd put it back down. Pick it up, cold, put it down. Pick it up, cold, put it down. Pick it up, cold, put it down. He did this for weeks. And then he realized one day when he went to the beach that he couldn't remember which stone he had picked up before. So he decided to pick up the stone. If it was cold, he threw it in the sea. And he did this hour after hour, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. He would pick up the stone. If it was cold, he'd throw it in the sea. Well, one day he picked it up, and it was a warm stone, but he'd already and he threw it into the sea. See, we do that. We go on automatic pilot. And we've thrown things away before we even know it in our lives. See, we're so frenetic in this life that we lose sight of what we want. Now, truthfully, what we want is not, by the way, stuff. What we want in this life is deeper connection with ourselves, with each other, and ultimately with God. That's what we want. Now this church, we love stuff in this church. Because we understand that if we don't have the stuff, at least the stuff that'll keep us going, you know, you can spend all your time just trying to get a house that you feel safe in, that you can afford. So we love stuff because we don't want to take our attention away from what feels good. And if we're all constantly trying to save and scrimp by, if we don't have things around us that please us, that make us happy, it's hard for us to have the time and the patience to go into the deeper stuff that our soul is really calling for, which is the stuff of connection in our life. That's what we're really wanting in our lives. You know, Roger Teal says, when we're in that place where we're looking for stuff and not the deeper connection, we're majoring in the minor. We're majoring in the minor when we're looking for stuff that's not the real stuff in our life. Or what Thoreau would say, we're living lives of quiet desperation. That's what happens when we're not looking for the things that really matter to us. If you looked at your life in the last year or couple of years, and you were honest with yourself, have you thrown back into the sea something in your life that used to matter to you? That used to matter to you? Do you wonder why your life is not going in the right direction in your marriages? Perhaps in your career? Do you wonder why the life is not going the way you want in your finances? Or perhaps in your health, any area of your life? Maybe it's because you've thrown touchstones back into the sea. You went on automatic pilot, and the things that used to matter to you, you've just thrown them away in your life. Today I want to offer 4 touchstones that sometimes are common, that we have thrown back into the sea, but that we need desperately to find in our lives in order for us to have that which we really want, which is a deeper walk with God. That God that is inside of us and in every single person on this planet. The first touchstone I think we've thrown back into the sea is rest. I think we've thrown that rest. We move so fast and furiously around here. And I'm the same way. I mean, we're just moving all of the time. We seldom are in a restful state in our lives. Literature suggests that the people in the United States are the most sleep-deprived people on the planet. See, there's a comic that says he thinks God's going to pull us over for speeding in our life. Many of us resist rest because we have bought the idea that it's unproductive, that it's a waste of time in our life. Paul says that we must not conform to the patterns of the world. We must not conform to the patterns of the world. And most of the patterns that you and I have are patterns that we learned from our parents, from our families of origin. You know, nobody in my family ever took a nap. I cannot remember anybody in my family ever taking a nap. In fact, when most dads were sitting down and watching football games, and I actually think that's the reason for sports teams, is so dads can sit down and rest a little bit on the couch. When most dads were sitting down watching television or watching a game, a football game or a baseball game, my dad had this little crackly transistor radio that he would take out to his shop, and he would listen to the ball game, but be doing something, constantly doing something. See, we have to be careful, because I have a guess that most people in this room may have had a message from your family of origin that rest was wasteful. It was wasting time. It was unproductive in our lives. In order to work with this idea, we have to let go of the nattering that's in our mind of our family of origins. But it's not only our family of origin that we sometimes are susceptible to conforming to the patterns of the world. It also can be society that we're susceptible to conforming to the patterns of the world that leads us to not enough rest. People who accept that notion that they have to work harder, that part of a tribe that has to work harder to be as good. Gay people, I'm telling you, you do not have to work harder to be as good. You are as good right now. People of color, I'm telling you, you don't have to work harder to be as good. You are as good right now. Women, you do not have to work harder to be as good. You are as good right now. Seniors, I'm telling you, you don't have to work harder to be as good. You are as good right now. But in order to do that, we have to know inside of ourselves that we're not pushing our tribe back farther if we take rest. Rest is a powerful, powerful part of our spiritual journey and the first touchstone. The second touchstone that we often throw away are spiritual practices. Now, I talk about this so much I don't need to spend a lot of time talking about this, but I will say that studies are now showing that the prisoners who meditate are able to make a bad situation tolerable. If that's true of prisoners who are in a bad situation, who are meditating, what would it be like if we actually took the time to meditate, to sit still in our lives? Ernest Holmes says that he can teach us a lot about God through the teachings of Science of Mind, but to know God, we have to sit still. We just have to sit still and begin to open up to the presence of God. But meditation is, of course, not the only spiritual practice. We have prayer. And we ask people to pray all the time. Paul said, pray without ceasing. See, I have a concern here in New Thought. I have a concern here, especially in these churches that are called Science of Mind churches, that because we have a 5-step prayer, that people have stopped praying because they're not sure how to do it. They're not sure if they're doing it right. And what if they do it wrong? Will the opposite of what they're praying for come to pass? And the answer is no. There is no bad way to pray. Affirmative prayer is a fabulous prayer, but the other way to pray is just sit down and talk to God with a grateful heart. And if you go to a church like this, you're traveling and you go to a church like this, and somebody tells you there's only one way to pray, walk out the door. Just walk out the door. Because it's important that we don't get caught up in this idea that if we don't do it right, we shouldn't do it at all. Prayer is a very powerful way of being. Contemplation is a very powerful spiritual practice. Ernest Holmes loved, in fact, he did more contemplation than he did meditation. He would take something, he loved to study the mystics, he loved to study New Thought teachers, especially Emerson, and he would study him, and then he would take a full day and contemplate one sentence. He would say, if I took one sentence and I asked myself, I read the sentence, and I asked myself this one question, what would my life be like if I believed this sentence? What would my life be like if this sentence was true? And he spent a whole day just thinking upon that in terms of his own life. Now, I know a lot of us in this room, we read daily affirmations. Some of us get them on our computer every day and we read them. Some of us read those books that are available to us through recovery. Some of us read the Science of Mind guides. There are just millions of daily affirmation guides around, and I suspect many in this room are vigilant about reading them. But are you vigilant about sitting down for another 5 minutes and saying, what would my life right now be like if this were true? If we can do that, we'll know what true contemplation is. And the last one is forgiveness. It's the last spiritual practice before we move on to the next touchstone, is forgiveness in our life. Forgiveness, and I don't need to tell you because you've all felt it. You know when you have either forgiven somebody else or been forgiven, a whole load comes off your shoulders. You simply feel lighter. You feel more connected to your divinity. But we make it so hard here. You know, when a baby, those of you who've had toddlers or been around toddlers, you know that in 1 minute they can be saying, I hate you. And not a second later, I love you. That's how we came here naturally. We learned all this idea that we shouldn't forgive and that we can't forgive and it's too hard to forgive and it's not time to forgive. And we've learned those behaviors. Babies don't go to workshops. They just know. I hate you, I love you. We can do that. I shared a story I've shared here before. I shared it last week with, in Placerville when I was there, and it just reminded me of it. So I want to share it again because it's such a powerful story to me about forgiveness. And it's about a man from Mexico City. And he had an estrangement with his son when his son was about 15 and now his son was about 30. And the man wanted to reunite with this boy, but he didn't know how. And to tell you the truth, he didn't know exactly what even happened. And isn't that the truth sometimes with our families? We have these estrangements and we have to go back and look and we're not even sure what actually happened. And that was his case. He didn't know what happened. And so he decided to put an ad in the Mexico City newspaper. And he says, boy's name was Paco. And he said, Paco, I want so desperately to say I'm sorry to you. Will you meet me in the square? Now in Mexico City there are lots of squares, and he told him which square to meet him. And he said, will you meet me at 10:30 on Sunday morning? And at 10:30 on Sunday morning he went, and what he found were about 30 young men, all named Paco. All named Paco. Who were thirsting for the forgiveness. See, this estrangement isn't our natural way. It's a touchstone we've thrown back into the sea. And we need to get it back. The next touchstone I want to talk about is presence power. Be where you are when you're there. It's not any more complicated than that. Be where you are when you're there. You know, we go on vacation and we get these video cameras and all we're doing is looking through the lens of the video camera. I have a friend, she and her husband went to Greece, and he'd just get up in the morning and that camera would go right up in front of his face, and he'd say, oh, this is so beautiful, and oh, it's so great. And then finally she touched him and she said, you know, I'm kind of beautiful too, and I'm right here also. See, the inner video camera that God put in you will remember all of those places. And if we can, we want to be present with our life when we're there. I have another story of a friend of mine who has 2 little girls. One of them is 5 and one of them is 3. And when the little girl who was 5 was younger, he got into the habit of having one time a week that was just theirs, father and daughter time. And so he'd take her to breakfast, or he'd take her to the zoo, or he'd take her for a walk, or he'd take her to the park, but it was just the 2 of them. And so when his 3-year-old got to be 3, he thought, you know what, I ought to start that with her too. So he took her to breakfast one morning at the Pancake House. And while their food was, before their food got there, he took her little hands in his and looked at her eyes, and he said, you know, honey, when your mom and I knew we were pregnant, we hoped we'd get a little girl just like you, just as precious as you are. You're so sweet and you're so funny and you're so terrific. And the food came and he let go of her hands and he went to eat his breakfast, and she said, more, Daddy, more. And so he turned back around and he said, you know, your eyes are just like your grandmother's eyes, and I love how you play with your sister and your little friends in the neighborhood, and we're just so proud of you. And he turned back to eat his pancakes, and she took his hands back and she said, more, Daddy, more. And this went on for 10 minutes. It's such a powerful example to me of how precious it is when someone is totally present with us. Precious presence power. We all need it. We all need somebody to take us, our hands, and look in our eyes and say specifically how precious we are. Do you know how you get that? You get it by giving it. Because the law of circulation is always in motion. You have somebody in your life who's looking for presence power right now. Don't let that idea that you've flown that touchstone back in the sea stop you from giving that to someone else. The last one I want to talk about is the most challenging, and that's the touchstone of inclusivity. The touchstone of inclusivity. We've thrown that back out without thinking. Here's why. Inclusivity is inconvenient. It is not convenient to be inclusive. It is much easier to be with our own tribe. It's much easier. There are no hurt feelings that can be had because of differences. It's easier because when we're own tribe, they always get our jokes. When we're in our own tribe, we have the same worldview, and the unfortunate part of that worldview is that sometimes it depicts who, it designs who it is we like and who it is we don't like, who it is we trust and who it is we don't trust. Inclusivity is inconvenient, but it is critical that we get that touchstone back and work very, very hard at it. See, exclusivity is a sin. Now, if you're new here, you know that sin simply is an archery term, and it means missing the mark. Exclusivity misses the mark. And we need to work hard to get that back. Several weeks ago, I put a flyer in the bulletin that invited people to come to a Black Lives Matter informational meeting. The reason that I put that into the flyer, and the reason I wanted to invite people, was not to have them become Black Lives Matter part of that team. It was because I wanted us to know about Black Lives Matter away from what we get, the images we get in the media. That it is much deeper than that, and that the platform of that program is actually very, very powerful. But the response I got from several people in the congregation was that I was taking sides against the police. Believe me, I am not taking sides against the police. I believe the police have the toughest job in the world. I have a friend here in the church this morning who has a son who is a policeman, and I know she worries about him every day he goes off to be a policeman, and this is a really good guy. But in the end, let me say that being a policeman is a choice. Black parents, when they have a son, they don't have a choice as to whether their child comes out black or not. These are difficult questions that we have here that we have to face. Brenda and I are fortunate we've been invited to come to a cops and clergy meeting next week in West Sacramento. And we're going to go and sit down with the West Sacramento Police Department and learn and talk and share about how we can talk to each other. And that's going to be powerful. I'm very excited about it. Yeah. Very excited. But make no mistake, while I am not asking any person in this church to become a member of Black Lives Matter, I respect them. The truth of the matter is this: love is the only answer to this situation. Also say that sometimes that love can look hard. See, Black Lives Matter, while I believe in their platform, they are an in-your-face organization. They are going to continue to disrupt politicians when they speak. They're going to continue to disrupt other areas in the community. But let me tell you, and we don't like that. We don't, nobody here, black, white, brown, does not care for disruption because it's not part of our natural nature. Our nature is harmony. Now the reason I respect them is because they are the alarm clock. Love is the answer. But they are the alarm clock that is going to keep us talking about this until we find a way to show love. Not everybody here. You know, here's how I see it, that there are three types of people. There are the people who are the in-your-face activists, and that's what Black Lives Matter is. And they are the alarm clock. I think they're critical. I'm not asking you to join them, and especially if that's not your nature. I'm going to tell you, that used to be my nature. It's not my nature anymore, I've realized. It's not my nature. Doesn't mean you won't ever see me out there, but that's not my nature. My nature now, so there's one group, the people who are going to be the in-your-face, the alarm clocks, saying, don't you think you're going to stop talking about this. Don't think it for a minute. And then there are the people who are going to keep talking about it and create ways like Jeff Pollard is doing and Tanya Beverly is doing and this church is doing. Finding ways, Reverend Brenda is doing, I'm doing, finding ways to keep the conversation going in a way that we can eventually, somebody somewhere is going to say, this is how we can do it. There are those people. And there are the people, and I hope they're from both groups, that are the prayers. The people who know that affirmative prayer is a powerful answer also. And we have to keep that up. Now, you know I'm a storyteller. I love to tell stories. I think that's how we learn. I think one of the ways that we're going to get closer, the people who are European American and the people who are African American and brown, Hispanic people, I think the way we're going to get closer, frankly, is one story at a time, so that we can begin to learn about each other. So I'm going to close this morning with a story. It's a story about a young girl, not a young girl, a young woman, an adult, who was part of a symphony, and she's on a train. Something entirely disturbing happened last night on my commute to rehearsal. It's a long tale, but one that is necessary to read and digest. I was sitting in the corner of the red line closest to the conductor when a group of about 8 black kids from the ages of 12 to 16 entered. I automatically noticed their presence because of how absolutely loud and rowdy they were being. Smiling to myself because of how crazy they were all acting, I turned up the music in my headphones and bounced along with the train. I noticed the boy sitting across from me. He entered the train with the other kids, and although also black and about their age, he clearly did not know them. From his body language, it was obvious he had desperately wished he sat in another section. At around the South Station stop, the conductor's door swung open, and my oversized headphones, I could tell she told the kids to quiet down. The kids mouthed off to her, and she called the MBTA security. At this point, my headphones were off, and I'm listening with full intent. The MBTA guard, a white man, walks on, and within 10 seconds, announces that he is calling the police, and the train will not move until they come. He is greeted with a resounding, "Are you kidding me?" from just about everyone on the train. I automatically zone out and think about what I was doing from the time I was 12 to 16. I think about breaking into my old elementary school and stealing ice cream. I think about joyriding my boyfriend's lifted bright green Chevy Blazer without a permit or a license. I think about getting caught drinking in a friend's backyard. I think about trespassing on private property and swimming. I think about getting pulled over twice in the same month on the same road in the same place by the same officer in the same car for the same reason, and waltzing away from the scene with nothing, and I mean nothing but a get home safe. I think about every single actually illegal thing I've ever done and realize one harrowing fact. I have never been touched by a police officer or been handcuffed or sent to jail. I have never even gotten a ticket. I have never left an interaction with the cops with anything other than, have a nice night. I wake up from my reverie and we are still parked in the South Station. I tune into the conversation around me and I hear the kids. Let me emphasize, kids. Kids making a game plan for what they will do if the police start to shoot them. I glanced up at the boy across from me. He is squirming. He wants off bad. He is texting fiercely. I'm assuming he's telling someone what we are both observing. The girl next to me notices my presence and says, I'm sorry for messing up your rhyme. I say, don't worry about it. My voice catches on the last word. My throat starts to sear. She asks, are you upset? I respond, yeah, I guess I am. I don't understand why they're calling the cops. And she says calmly, because we are black. The police arrive and everyone remains very calm, eerily calm. Everyone is walking on eggshells. The cops step on the train and tell the kids if they get off quietly and go on the next one and go home, they can go home. The kids accept the offer and begin to clamber off. All at long last, the boy across from me and I are left alone. As I begin to put my headphones back on, the police re-enter the car. They look at the boy and say, we said everyone in the group has to get off. The boy says, I don't know them. The police says, it's an order. Everyone in the group has to get off. I collect my bags. The police looks at me and says, not you, you're not in the group. The police places his hand on the boy's shoulder and guides him off the train. In a moment of temporary rage blindness, I stand up and scream, he doesn't effing know these kids. The police looks at me and says, is that true? To which I say, yes, and it was true when he said it too. The police release the boy and he sits down across from me again. We share a moment of blankness and then tears well up in both of our eyes. He waves me over to the seat next to him. He says, that was because I'm black, wasn't it? I nod. He looks down sheepishly at his shirt and says quietly, I'm just happy they didn't hurt me. That would kill my mom. She's not someone you want to mess with. I say the only thing I can think of. I'm so sorry. With all that's going on in the world, I'm so scared all the time, he says. The train rattles into my station and I shake his hand and he says, thanks. I mumble, don't mention it. I exit the train and watch it pull away, and then I weep. I weep in a way I've never wept before. My shortness of breath, and I begin to crumble. I weep for Trayvon Martin. I weep for Mike Brown. I weep for Sandra Bland. I weep for Alton Sterling. I weep for Eric Gardner. I weep for all the names I don't know but should. I weep for their families. I weep for their friends. I weep for the innocent blood shed all over this country. I weep for that boy. I weep that I can't even remember his name because it's not as familiar to me as James or Tim or Dave. I weep for those kids. I weep for all the kids. We have an opportunity, you and I. We have an opportunity as European Americans, and we have an opportunity as African Americans and Hispanic Americans and Asian Americans. We have an opportunity now to keep the conversation going. To every time you have an opportunity to get in a conversation, gently, not with superiority, not with a high horse, not with making anybody else bad, but every time you have an opportunity to get in a conversation about race and inclusivity and oneness in this country, I invite you to do it. Will it be scary? Yes. Will you make a mistake? Probably. I've certainly made mistakes in those discussions in my time. I've lived through it, and so will you. But who isn't living through it are some of the sons and daughters of people who are out there and are victims to ignorance and to hate. So I hope that you will take this advantage and know that this is simply a touchstone that was thrown into the sea that we can get back. Because we are powerful spiritual warriors, you and I. Let's take this message into prayer, knowing that there is only one power. It's the power of love, and it just simply flows through me. I don't have to do anything. What I have to do is to keep from blocking it with my fear, with my prejudice, with my bad ideas. But just to let that love flow through me. It speaks for itself everywhere I go. I'm not putting anybody out of my life. I'm not putting the police out. I'm not putting people of color out. I'm not even putting Donald Trump out. I'm not putting anybody out of my life. I'm going to pray for everybody so that we can come to the understanding of spiritual truth, that we are one. I give thanks for this. I release this word into the law. Together we say, and so it is.